Never before has a former U.S. president been criminally charged for attempting to hold on to power after losing an election. Donald Trump has again made history.
Today, an indictment was unsealed, charging Donald J. Trump with conspiring to defraud the United States, conspiring to disenfranchise voters, and conspiring and attempting to obstruct an official proceeding.
In November 2020, 81 million Americans voted for Joe Biden. But Trump deliberately ignored the truth that his loss was fair, despite being informed otherwise by credible advisors many times, as documented in the indictment. Instead, Trump continually repeated what prosecutors called prolific lies, that the election had been stolen.
We will never give up. We will never concede. It doesn't happen. You don't concede when there's theft involved.
The indictment lists 6 unnamed co-conspirators that likely include Rudy Giuliani, accusing them of helping Trump to pressure state election officials, the Justice Department, and then Vice President Mike Pence to fraudulently toss out votes for Biden. When they all refused, according to the indictment, Trump directed his supporters to stop Congress from certifying Biden's win. That turned into a violent attack on the U.S. Capitol, leading to 5 deaths.
It was fueled by lies. Lies by the defendant, targeted at obstructing a bedrock function of the U.S. government, the nation's process of collecting, counting, and certifying the results of the presidential election.
In an online statement, Trump accused prosecutors of acting on behalf of Biden to interfere with the upcoming presidential election, in which Trump and Biden could face off again. The two are currently tied in polls. The White House has declined to comment. Trump has been summoned to appear before the magistrate judge here in D.C. on Thursday, and all eyes will once again be on the former U.S. president forced to answer to yet more criminal charges, but most notably in this case, facing accusations that he tried to overturn the legitimate results of a Democratic election. Heidi Jo Castro, Al Jazeera, Washington.
Okay, let's bring in Claire Finkelstein. She is the Director of the Centre for Ethics and the Rule of Law at the University of Pennsylvania. She joins us now from New Hampshire. Thank you very much for being on Al Jazeera. First of all, from what you've been able to see so far, how strong is this case against Donald Trump?
It's an extremely strong case because it charges him with conspiracy along with 6 unindicted co-conspirators whose actions have been well documented. It's though the Justice Department does not typically name unindicted co-conspirators, it's fairly clear who the individuals are, and reporting that has taken place for many, many months has made clear what their contribution has been. For example, John Eastman, who was the lawyer who crafted the original blueprint that launched the January 6th insurrection and helped to convince Donald Trump that he could indeed prevail in the 2020 election despite the clear and resounding failure at the polls. And so the complicity of these lawyers, and 5 of the 6 are clearly lawyers, is absolutely apparent, has been apparent for some time. And the fact that they lent their services to Donald Trump to both convince him and to collude with him to steal the 2020 election and to overturn the will of the voters will be very convincing to a federal jury.
As we heard just before, the Special Counsel Jack Smith described Trump's actions as an attack on democracy. I mean, how important is this case for American democracy and the rule of law in the US?
In my opinion, August 1st, 2023 will be remembered by this indictment as one of the most important moments for restoring the rule of law practically since the end of the Civil War in this country. Bringing an indictment against a former president a president who has convinced about a quarter of the U.S. population that he actually won an election that he lost, is critical, not just because it contributes to setting the tables right with regard to the actual law, but also because it helps to rectify the massive disinformation campaign that Donald Trump and his allies have been on ever since the 2020 election, which he lost. And so the clarity, for example, that Jack Smith spoke with today in his statement was designed not just to make a legal appeal, but to make an appeal to the country and to its morals and to its democratic foundations, so that we understand how democratic elections take place in this country and that no one is under any illusions about, in fact, how our elections work.
How much urgency do you think there is from the DOJ to try and get this case to trial as quickly as possible, you know, obviously before the elections November next year?
Well, here's the specter that looms over us all. If Donald Trump were to be elected president and there were to be an ongoing trial at that point, and so no conviction were yet to have come in, the country would be in a constitutional crisis of unparalleled proportions. Because at that point, we have a background principle from the Department of Justice based on 3 memos that have really been adhered to quite strongly over time, that a sitting president cannot be indicted. Now, this would be a very different situation. This would be a situation in which an individual who was previously indicted could potentially become president. And what would the principle then be? But were Donald Trump to become president with trials still hanging over his head, he could immediately eviscerate these trials. He could replace the attorney general. He could replace Jack Smith. He would indeed. And he could start attacking his enemies and using the Department of Justice not to restore the rule of law, but, of course, to punish anyone who had tried to hold him accountable for his crimes. So we would be in a very bad position indeed if these convictions did not come in prior to the election. However, we must remember, of course, I'm talking about convictions, that any criminal defendant, Donald Trump included, is presumed innocent.
Okay, thank
until
you.
Proven guilty.
Yeah, thank you so much. That is Claire Finkelstein, Director of the Centre for Ethics and the Rule of Law at the University of Pennsylvania. Thank you.
Thank you.